The first thing you should know is that I never meant for it to happen. Not like that. Not with him. When Leo moved into my apartment, it was supposed to be temporary. A couple months, maybe 3. His lease fell through, my spare room was empty, and we'd been friends long enough that it felt harmless. That was the lie I told myself. Leo and I worked together at the same tech startup. Different teams, same floor. We'd grab coffee, complain about deadlines, sit next to each other during all-hands meetings, and pass sarcastic comments under the table. He was straight. Had a rotating cast of girls he talked about, just enough to make it clear, but not enough to be obnoxious. And I was out. Not loudly, not quietly, just out. He knew. It had never been weird. That's why I said yes when he asked if he could crash at my place for a bit. The first week was fine. Normal. Even. He unpacked slowly, like he didn't want to admit he was settling in, left his running shoes by the door, took over half the fridge with meal prep containers. We coexisted. Then the second week hit, and something shifted. It was small stuff at first. He'd knock on my door instead of texting, sit on my bed when we talked instead of the chair, start conversations late at night that felt heavier than they needed to be. One Thursday, we both came home late. The kind of late where your brain feels fried and your body's running on autopilot. I dropped my bag by the door and kicked off my shoes. "You want a beer?" Leo asked. "I want 5, I said. He laughed and tossed me one anyway. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the TV on but ignored. The city lights flickered through the window, and the apartment felt smaller than usual, quieter. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I glanced over. "You already are." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Does it ever get lonely?" The question caught me off guard. "What? Being gay?" He winced. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "Just being you. Being on your own all the time." I thought about it for a second. "Yeah," I said honestly. "Sometimes." He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd been turning over in his head. That night, he didn't go to his room right away. We talked until the beer was gone and the clock crept past midnight. About work. About stupid stuff. About nothing. At some point, he shifted closer. Our knees touched. Neither of us moved. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and locked the screen. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. Then, quieter. "I don't really want to be alone tonight." My heart started doing something it had no business doing. "You can hang out," I said carefully. "I'm not kicking you out." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "I mean, I don't want to sleep alone." The air changed. Thickened. I could have shut it down. Should have, probably. But instead, I heard myself say, "You can crash in here if you want." He hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, fully clothed. A careful distance between us. The room was dark except for the glow of the streetlights. I stared at the ceiling, acutely aware of every sound he made, every shift of the mattress. "You awake?" he whispered. "Yeah." "Do you ever think about crossing lines?" I swallowed. "All the time." He turned onto his side, facing me. I could feel his breath now. Warm. Close. "Me too," he said. That was the moment I knew nothing was going to be the same. And I didn't stop it. We lay there like that for a long time, facing each other in the dark. Neither of us brave enough to close the distance, or stupid enough to pretend it wasn't there. I could hear Leo breathing. Slow. Controlled. Too controlled. My own heart felt like it was rattling around my rib cage, loud enough that I was convinced he could hear it. The bed felt smaller than it ever had before, like the space between us was shrinking on its own. "Hey," he said quietly. "Yeah? Can I ask something? And you promise not to make it weird?" I almost laughed. Almost. At this point, I don't think that's possible, but sure. He hesitated. I could feel it in the silence. If I crossed a line tonight, would you stop me? The question hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. I stared at his face, barely visible in the low light. He wasn't smirking, wasn't teasing. This wasn't some drunken curiosity or half-baked joke. His eyes were serious, searching. I don't know, I said honestly. I'd probably ask what you were doing first. He nodded like he expected that answer. Fair. Another pause. I don't want to mess things up, he added. You matter too much to me. That almost broke me. You're not the only one who feels that way, I said. He shifted, just slightly, and the mattress dipped. His knee brushed mine this time. A clear choice. A test. I didn't move away. That seemed to be all the permission he needed. Leo didn't rush anything. He didn't grab me or lean in like he'd been waiting for it. Instead, he lifted his hand slowly, like he was giving me time to say no, and rested it on the bed between us. Palm up. An offering. My throat went dry. I stared at his hand for a second that felt way too long, then slid mine into his. The contact was simple, almost innocent, fingers curling together, warm skin against warm skin. But the second our hands met, something inside my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. Okay, he whispered. Okay. That word kept repeating between us like a quiet agreement. We stayed like that for a while, just holding hands, as ridiculous as that sounds. Like teenagers instead of two grown men who'd been dancing around each other without admitting it. Eventually, Leo squeezed my hand gently. Can I get closer? I nodded. He shifted toward me, slow and careful, until our legs were tangled and his forehead rested lightly against mine. I could feel his breath on my lips. Could smell the faint soap he used, something clean and familiar. You're shaking, he murmured. So are you. He let out a quiet laugh, more breath than sound. Yeah. Guess I am. We didn't kiss. Not yet. Instead, he wrapped an arm around my waist and pulled me closer, like that was all he needed for the moment. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was fast, almost as fast as mine. For the first time that night, I felt calm, safe. We fell asleep like that, fully clothed, limbs tangled, nothing crossed except a line that had been bending for weeks. I woke up sometime before dawn. The room was gray with early morning light, the city still quiet outside. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I felt Leo's arm around me. My brain kicked into overdrive instantly. Panic, hope, fear, excitement, all of it at once. I stayed still, afraid that moving would shatter whatever fragile peace we'd created. He stirred a moment later. Morning, he said, voice rough with sleep. Morning. We looked at each other. No awkward scrambling, no sudden distance, just a quiet understanding that last night hadn't been a dream. I don't regret it, he said softly, like he needed to say it out loud. I was hoping you'd say that. He smiled, small and real. Then his expression shifted, something thoughtful settling in. I don't know what this makes me, or us. I shrugged. We don't have to decide that today. He seemed relieved by that. Good. Because I don't want to run from it either. We stayed in bed longer than we should have, talking in low voices as the city woke up around us. About nothing important. About everything. When we finally got up, things felt different. Not awkward. Charged. At breakfast, our hands brushed while reaching for the coffee pot. He didn't pull away. At the door before leaving for work, he hesitated, then squeezed my shoulder. Tonight? He asked. Tonight? I said. He smiled and left. And for the first time since he moved in, I realized this wasn't temporary anymore. Whatever we were doing, whatever we were becoming, it was just getting started. That night stretched longer than it had any right to. Work was a blur. I stared at my screen, reread the same lines of code, nodded through meetings without absorbing a single word. Every thought circled back to Leo, how his voice had sounded that morning, low and unguarded, How easy it had felt to wake up with him there like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I got home, the apartment was empty. His shoes weren't by the door yet, no music playing from his room. I dropped my bag on the chair and stood there for a second, suddenly aware of how quiet everything felt without him. I told myself not to overthink it. I made dinner for 1, but left extra out of habit. The clock crept past 7, then 8. I was rinsing a plate when the door finally opened. "Hey," Leo said, sounding tired but lighter than he had all day. "Hey." We hovered in the entryway like two people who didn't know where to put their hands. He kicked off his shoes slowly. "Long day." "Same." Silence. Not uncomfortable, but charged. Like both of us were waiting for the other to make the first move. Leo broke it with a breathy laugh. "Okay, this is stupid. We didn't forget how to talk overnight, right?" I smiled despite myself. "I was wondering the same thing." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "Can I come into your room again?" The question mattered. I appreciated that he asked. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." We didn't rush this time either. We sat on the bed, facing each other, legs crossed like we were about to have a serious conversation. And in a way, we were. "I've been thinking about this all day," he admitted. "About last night." "Me too. I keep replaying it, trying to figure out if I imagine how right it felt." "You didn't," I said quietly. He looked relieved. "Good." Then he hesitated. "I need to say something, and it might come out wrong." "Say it anyway." "I've never done this," he said. "Not with a guy. Not even close." I nodded. "I know. It's not that I'm scared," he continued. "I just don't want to hurt you because I'm still figuring myself out." That honesty hit deep. "I don't expect you to have answers," I said. "I just need you to be honest. That's all." He reached out, fingers brushing my wrist, tentative. "I can do that." This time, when he leaned in, I met him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, exploratory, lips brushing like we were learning each other's language from scratch. His breath caught when our mouths fully met, and that tiny sound sent a rush through me I wasn't prepared for. Leo pulled back slightly, forehead resting against mine. "Okay," he whispered again, like that word had become our anchor. We kissed again, deeper this time, less cautious. His hand slid to my waist, fingers curling into my shirt like he needed something solid to hold onto. I let my hands roam too, his shoulders, his back, memorizing the feel of him. Everything stayed slow, intentional. We didn't cross every line. Not yet. When we finally lay back on the bed, tangled together, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. "I don't want this to be a secret," he said quietly. That surprised me. "You don't?" "I don't mean telling everyone tomorrow," he clarified. "I just mean between us. I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." I turned onto my side to face him. "Then don't." He studied my face, like he was committing it to memory. "You know this changes things, right?" "Yeah," I said. But I think things were already changing. We just finally stopped ignoring it. He smiled at that, a real smile. Then he kissed my forehead, something unexpectedly tender that made my chest tighten. We fell asleep wrapped around each other again, but this time it felt different, more certain, less accidental. The next few days were strange, in a good way. We acted normal in public. At work, we were still just coworkers. Friends, nothing to see here. But at home, everything was quieter, softer, more intentional. Lingering touches, shared looks that said more than words. One night, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, Leo met my eyes in the mirror. "Do you ever get scared that this is just temporary for me?" he asked. I thought about lying. Instead, I shook my head. "I get scared, yeah, but I also trust you. And that counts for something." He nodded slowly. "I don't know where this ends, but I don't want it to end because I was too afraid to see it through." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just curiosity for him, it was a crossroads. And whatever came next, whatever complications, whatever consequences, we were already past the point of turning back. Because we weren't just sharing a bed anymore. We were sharing something much harder to undo. Hope. The thing no one tells you about moments like this, the almost relationship, the not yet defined thing, is how loud the outside world suddenly becomes. Before Leo, my apartment had been a bubble, safe, predictable, mine, but once we crossed that invisible line, it felt like everything outside our front door leaned in closer, waiting to see what we'd do next. It started subtly. A lingering glance from one of our coworkers when Leo laughed a little too hard at something I said during a meeting. A pause when someone asked if we were still just roommates. A friend joking, "You two spend a lot of time together lately," in a tone that felt just a little too curious. None of it was direct. None of it was accusatory. But it was enough to remind us that whatever we were building existed in a real world that loved labels and explanations. Leo noticed it too. One evening, we were cooking dinner together, something simple, pasta and a jarred sauce we pretended was better than it was. Music played softly from my phone, and we moved around each other easily, bodies brushing without apology. "Did Mark say something weird to you today?" Leo asked casually, stirring the sauce. I glanced up. "What kind of weird?" "He asked if we were dating," he said. Just like that. My stomach tightened. "And?" "I told him no," Leo said quickly. Too quickly. "I mean, not exactly." I didn't know what to say. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's fair." But something in his tone stuck with me. Later that night, when we were lying in bed, my bed, his head resting on my shoulder, I brought it up. "You don't have to answer questions you're not ready for," I said. "I get that." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not ashamed," he said finally. "I just don't want to say something out loud before I understand it myself." "I know." "I'm scared I'll say the wrong thing and hurt you." That honesty mattered more than any public declaration could have. "Then let's just take it one day at a time," I said. "No announcements? No pressure." He exhaled, relief clear in the way his body relaxed against mine. "Thank you." But even with that agreement, the tension didn't disappear. A week later, we went out with friends. Our friends. A familiar bar, loud music, sticky floors. Leo stood close to me the entire night, but every time his hand brushed mine, he hesitated. Pulled back. I didn't say anything until we got home. "You were distant tonight," I said gently. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear. "I didn't want to mess up." "You weren't." "I didn't know where the line was," he admitted. "What's okay in public? What's not?" I stepped closer. "We can figure that out together." He looked at me, eyes softening. "I don't want to hide you." Those words landed heavier than he probably realized. That night, things felt different again. Less hesitant, more grounded. Like we'd finally acknowledged the elephant in the room without letting it trample us. Still, doubt crept in during quiet moments. One afternoon, while Leo was at work late, I caught myself wondering how long this could last. Whether I was borrowing time from a future that would eventually ask for it back with interest. Whether I was setting myself up for a heartbreak I'd swear I could survive, but secretly feared I wouldn't. When Leo came home that night, I didn't hide it well. "You okay?" he asked, setting his bag down. "Yeah," I said automatically. Then sighed. "No, not really." He sat beside me without hesitation. "Talk to me." "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of you. Of what happens if one day you wake up and realize this isn't what you want." He didn't interrupt. Just listened. "I know you're figuring things out," I continued. "And I don't regret any of this. I just need to know I'm not a phase." The silence afterward felt endless. Then Leo took my hands, grounding me. "You're not a phase," he said firmly. "You're a person I care about, deeply." "But I don't know where I'll land," he said honestly. "But I know this matters. You matter." That didn't erase the fear, but it steadied it. We kissed slowly, deliberately. No urgency. just reassurance. For the first time since this started, I realized that uncertainty didn't mean instability. It just meant we were being honest, instead of pretending to have answers we didn't. Still, something loomed on the horizon. Because no matter how careful we were, no matter how quietly we moved, there was one truth we hadn't faced yet. Eventually, someone was going to see us. And when that happened, pretending we were just roommates wouldn't be enough anymore. That realization sat between us, unspoken but heavy, as we fell asleep that night. Both of us knowing the next step wouldn't be as gentle as the ones before. And that we'd have to decide, sooner or later, whether we were brave enough to take it together. The moment came sooner than either of us expected. It wasn't dramatic. No confrontation. No grand confession. Just an ordinary Saturday that turned into something neither of us could undo. We'd been invited to a small housewarming, one of Leo's coworkers. Nothing wild, just drinks, music, people we half knew. The kind of thing you show up to for an hour and leave early. We went together. That alone felt like a step. The apartment was packed, warm with bodies and noise. Someone handed us beers as soon as we walked in. Leo stayed close, shoulder brushing mine as we navigated the room. Familiar, comforting. For a while, everything was fine. Then someone cracked a joke about couples' photos, pointing at the wall where pictures were pinned with clothespins. "You two should take one," they said casually. "You look good together." The room didn't go silent. No one stared. But time slowed just enough for me to feel it. Leo laughed. "Oh, we're not." He stopped. I turned to look at him. Something shifted in his expression. Not panic, not fear. Decision. "Not exactly just friends," he finished. The words hung there, fragile and exposed. I didn't look away. No one gasped. A couple people raised their eyebrows. Someone nodded like it made sense. "Oh," the guy said. "Cool." That was it. But for Leo, it was everything. Later, out on the balcony where the city lights hummed below us, he leaned against the railing and stared out into the night. "You okay?" I asked. He laughed quietly. "My heart's trying to escape my chest, but yeah, I think so. You didn't have to say anything." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." That night, back home, the air between us felt different again. Lighter, like we'd dropped something heavy we didn't realize we'd been carrying. Leo kissed me the second the door closed. No hesitation this time, no checking in with his eyes, just certainty. "I don't want to keep doing this halfway," he said against my mouth. My breath caught. "Then don't." That was the night we crossed the last line. It wasn't rushed or reckless. It was slow, deliberate, full of pauses and whispered check-ins. We took our time learning each other in ways we hadn't before, reading reactions, responding instead of assuming. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the city quiet outside the window. Leo traced lazy circles on my chest. "I'm scared," he admitted. "So am I, but I don't want to back away anymore." I turned onto my side, facing him. "Then stay." He smiled, soft and real. "I am." The next morning, we woke up later than usual. Sunlight spilled across the bed, illuminating the quiet truth we could no longer ignore. This wasn't temporary. We weren't pretending, and neither of us knew exactly where this would lead. But for the first time, that uncertainty felt less like a threat and more like a promise, because whatever came next, we'd already chosen each other. And that changed everything. The funny thing about finally choosing something is realizing how much energy you'd been wasting pretending you hadn't already. The days after that night felt unreal in the quietest way possible. Nothing exploded. The world didn't shift on its axis. We still woke up to alarms, complained about work, argued about whose turn it was to take out the trash. But underneath all of it, there was a steadiness that hadn't been there before. Leo stopped hesitating. It showed up in the smallest moments. The way he reached for my hand when we crossed the street without thinking about who might see. The way he leaned into me on the couch, head resting against my shoulder like it had always belonged there. The way he introduced me, not as his roommate, not as my friend, but just by my name, standing close enough that the implication was clear. I didn't push him to define anything. I didn't have to. One night, while we were cooking dinner, music on, wine open, the kitchen warm with steam and laughter, he caught me watching him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "You seem lighter," I said. He considered that. "I feel lighter." He set the spoon down and leaned against the counter, looking at me more seriously. I didn't realize how much I was holding myself back. "Not just from this, from a lot of things," I nodded. "That happens when you're scared of wanting something." He laughed softly. "Yeah, turns out I was really good at that." Not everything was easy, though. A week later, Leo came home quiet, not distant, but weighed down. He dropped his bag by the door and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. "Hey," I said, sitting beside him. "What's going on?" He hesitated. "I told my sister." My heart jumped. "Okay." "And?" She asked if I was sure, he said. Not in a bad way, just in a, "this is real," way. "And are you?" He looked at me then, eyes steady. "Yeah, I am." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "She told me she was proud of me," he added. "Said she could tell I'd been happier lately." I smiled. "Sounds like a good conversation." "It was," he said, then quieter. "But it made things feel more real, like there's no pretending anymore." I reached for his hand. "You don't have to rush anything. Not with me." "I know," he said. "That's why this feels safe." That word, safe, settled deep in my chest. Still, doubt crept in when I least expected it. One night, lying in bed together, the room dark and quiet, Leo shifted restlessly. "You ever worry I'll change my mind?" he asked. The honesty surprised me. "I worry about everything," I admitted. "But I don't think you'd lie to me, and that matters more." He rolled onto his side, facing me. "I don't want to hurt you." "I know," I said. "And I don't want you to stay if you stop wanting this. That would hurt more." He studied my face, like he was weighing something heavy. "I don't feel like I'm trying this on," he said finally. "I feel like I finally stopped ignoring something that was already there." That was the first time he said something like that. It scared me and comforted me. The next test came from outside our bubble. A mutual friend invited us to a birthday dinner. Small group, familiar faces, no strangers. Leo squeezed my hand before we went in. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just nervous." We didn't make an announcement. Didn't need to. We sat close, shared food, laughed easily. At some point, one of our friends looked between us and smirked. "So," she said, "you guys gonna tell us, or should we pretend we're oblivious?" Leo froze. I didn't speak. I waited. He took a breath. "We're together." No qualifiers, no explanations. She smiled. "About time." That was it. Later, walking home under the glow of streetlights, Leo laughed, the sound full and unrestrained. That was way less scary than I thought. "Most things are," I said. He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Thank you for not pushing, for letting me get here my way." I stepped closer. "You showed up. That's what matters." He kissed me there, on the sidewalk, unbothered by who might see. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't fragile anymore. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't defined by neat labels or certainty. But it was honest, chosen, actively lived instead of quietly avoided. Later that night, curled together in bed, Leo rested his head on my chest. "You know," he said, voice sleepy, "I used to think choosing something meant losing everything else." I ran my fingers through his hair, and now it feels like I finally picked something that fits. I closed my eyes, holding on to that, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for the ending. I was living in the middle of something still unfolding, and trusting that wherever it led, we'd face it the same way we'd started. Slowly. Honestly. Together. The first real fight didn't come with yelling. That surprised me. It came on a Tuesday night. Quiet and tired and inconvenient, like most important things do. Leo had been off all week. Not distant, exactly, but stretched thin. Shorter replies. Long pauses. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, just crowded with thoughts that haven't found words yet. I noticed. I just didn't say anything at first. That night, we were both half awake on the couch, some documentary playing in the background. Leo stared at the TV like he was watching it, but I knew better by now. "You want to talk?" I asked gently. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't know how." "Try anyway." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm scared I'm doing this wrong." My chest tightened. "Wrong how?" "I keep thinking there's some version of me I'm supposed to be," he said. "Some script I missed. And even though this, us, feels right, there's this voice that keeps asking what I'm giving up." I didn't interrupt. "I don't want to wake up one day and realize I resented you for something you never asked me to sacrifice." That one hurt. But I understood it. "I don't want to be the thing you blame," I said softly. "And I don't want to be the thing you're afraid to want." He nodded, eyes glossy but steady. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said. "But we can't promise futures we haven't lived yet. All we can do is be honest while we're here." That was the fight. No slammed doors, no raised voices. Just two people admitting they were scared of loving each other wrong. We didn't fix everything that night. We didn't need to. The days after were quieter, but not colder. More intentional. Like we were checking our footing instead of sprinting forward blind. And then, something shifted again. It was subtle at first. Leo stopped framing things as "if this lasts" and started saying when we travel, when we move, when we host friends instead of going out. One night he caught himself doing it and froze. "You okay?" I asked. He laughed softly. "Yeah, just realized something." "What?" I stopped picturing an exit. That hit harder than any grand declaration could have. A month later, we moved furniture. Not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. His room became an office. My room became ours. It wasn't dramatic. No ceremony. Just a quiet acknowledgement that neither of us was going anywhere. One evening, as we lay in bed listening to rain hit the windows, Leo spoke into the dark. "You know I don't need to have everything figured out to choose you, right?" I turned onto my side, facing him. "Yeah, I do." He pressed his forehead to mine. "I choose you anyway." That was the moment I finally let go of the fear that I'd been bracing for an ending the entire time. Life didn't suddenly get simpler. We still had doubts. Still had conversations that took effort. Still had moments where the world outside felt louder than the space we shared. But we weren't borrowing time anymore. We were living inside it. And somewhere between shared mornings, quiet nights, and choosing each other over and over again, not because it was easy, but because it was honest, we stopped asking what this was. Because we were already inside the answer. There wasn't a single moment where everything clicked into place. No dramatic realization. No sudden certainty that wiped away every doubt we'd ever had. What happened instead was quieter. And somehow, that made it real. It crept up on us in the middle of ordinary days. Like the morning Leo forgot his coffee on the counter, and I chased him down the hallway with it, both of us laughing like idiots. Or the night we argued over something stupid, laundry, I think, and 5 minutes later he knocked on the bathroom door just to say, "I don't like being annoyed with you." It showed up when we stopped narrating what we were doing, stopped checking in every step of the way, not because we didn't care, but because trust had replaced fear. A year passed before I noticed it had been a year. We didn't celebrate the anniversary of the night he stayed in my bed. Or the first kiss. Or the first time we said we were together. None of those dates felt right, because none of them were the beginning. The beginning had been slow. Invisible. 100 small choices instead of one big one. One evening we were sitting on the fire escape, city lights blinking below us, summer air thick and warm. Leo leaned back against the brick wall, his leg pressed against mine, familiar and grounding. "Do you ever think about who we were before this?" he asked. Sometimes, I said. Do you miss it? He thought about it. Really thought. No, I don't miss not knowing. That made me smile. I think I was scared of becoming someone new, he continued. But it turns out I just became more myself. I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because now, it was. There were still moments of doubt. They didn't disappear completely, they just stopped running the show. He still had days where he wrestled with expectations that weren't his anymore. I still had days where I braced for loss out of habit. But we learned how to talk about it without turning it into a threat. We learned that love didn't need certainty to survive, just honesty. One night, long after midnight, Leo rolled onto his side and looked at me, eyes heavy with sleep. You know what scares me now? He murmured. What? Losing this, he said. Not because it would destroy me, but because I'd know exactly what I was losing. I kissed his forehead. That's how you know it's real. We never made grand promises. No dramatic vows whispered in the dark. No guarantees about forever. But somewhere along the way, forever stopped feeling like a demand and started feeling like a direction. We chose each other in the mundane moments. In the mornings, when we were cranky and tired. In the evenings, when silence felt better than conversation. In the arguments we stayed for instead of escaping. And one day, standing in the kitchen while Leo washed dishes and I dried them, he said casually, "This feels like home." That was it. No music. No spotlight. Just truth, spoken without hesitation. I realized then that love, real love, doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles in. It rearranges the furniture. It makes space where fear used to live. We didn't end up with the story people expect. We didn't figure everything out, but we found something better. We found a way to stay. And sometimes, late at night, when the city quiets and the world stops asking questions, I think back to the night he said he didn't want to sleep alone. I think about how close we came to walking past something that would change everything. And I'm grateful we didn't. Because what we built wasn't accidental. It was chosen. Again and again. Quietly, together,